Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to another reaction video. Today we are diving into a video of an event that happened with a California teacher. This is a Black teacher who teaches second grade out in California. So it started with a group text that she had with other faculty and staff at the school. And apparently there were microaggressions being made within that group chat. She sought support on campus through mental health professionals, people like that. And then apparently, I guess it didn't stop. So apparently it culminated with her making some threats over that text thread on the 13th. And that's when police got involved. As you'll see in the video that we react to, it seems like she was being told she was transported to a mental health facility, but it ended up that she was transported to the local jail instead, where she has remained to this day. And so there's a lot of controversy around how the mental health situation was handled. Her family is saying that she has no history of aggression or violence, that she was not in her right mind. And so I want to dive into some of this, how law enforcement and mental health connect and intersect with each other and sometimes step on each other's toes, and whether microaggressions like the ones described in the text messages can trigger delusions like her family is saying she's experiencing. So let's dive into it.
Tonight, the NAACP is speaking out about the arrest of a natomas teacher taken into custody during what her family says was a mental health crisis.
Lots to unpack with this one. CBS 13's Rachel Wolf has the controversy.
The NAACP stood alongside family members of Kaylin Footman.
My daughter needs to be placed in a mental health facility. Don't criminalize my daughter for being ill.
And so the involvement of the NAACP does bring an interesting facet of this into light, is that this is a Black teacher. And just from my experience working with kids, a lot of times Black kids, especially Black boys, tend to have their behavior criminalized more often than they'll receive help and support the way that white kids or maybe Asian kids might. And so that's definitely a disparity when it comes to mental health and the perception that either teachers, mental health professionals, or police officers might have, that there might be a bias towards criminal rather than mental health.
And as a second grade teacher at Paso Verde School in the Natomas School District, who has spent nearly a week inside the Sac County Jail after an incident with school staff October 9th.
So the fact that she's been in jail for a week speaks to that there must be some kind of charges pending. If she were just being held on like a TDO, which is a temporary detaining order for her safety or for someone else's safety, at least in Virginia, there are very strict limits on how long someone can be held for their own safety or for someone else's safety when there are no criminal charges, when it's a purely mental health issue. And that is measured in days. And then every day after that, you actually have to have a group of medical professionals, legal professionals convene and talk about whether you need to stay another day in the mental health facility or a secure facility, that kind of thing. And so the fact that a week has gone by and she's still in the jail means that there have to be some kind of charges or something criminal pending. And it's not purely just for mental health or safety reasons.
What her mother describes as racist microaggression.
And after being pushed beyond her limits and being denied access to care, my daughter became delusional and irrational.
Delusional and irrational. Later on, you'll hear the mom also say that her daughter has no history of aggression or mental health problems, and that this was solely triggered by these microaggressions. I don't know how micro they are if she's claiming that they led to her daughter becoming delusional and irrational. In my experience, there would have been some kind of pre-existing condition or concern that might have triggered the delusions or the irrationality or the emotional instability. But the microaggressions by themselves, I find it really hard to imagine how that could have brought it on. That's not to say, however, that this one might have been very distraught by the conversation that she was in. And again, I don't have access to those text messages, so I don't know how serious it was, whether she had repeatedly asked them to stop and they weren't respecting her boundaries. And I don't know what help she sought in the days leading up to when she was actually arrested. I don't know whether the mental health professional on campus just kind of dismissed her concerns, or administration wasn't willing to step in to put a stop to what was going on. But I can see how increasingly feeling desperate, she might have said something that was very unwise because she was feeling so upset by what was going on, then turned into something criminal. Because what we run into is that this is at least for kids, okay? So I'm not trying to say that she's mentally like a child or anything, but we see this a lot in kids who say a lot of things that are trying to convey a very big emotion, but come out sounding very threatening. Like, I hate you, I want to die, maybe I'll just kill myself. All of those things that a lot of times kids say in the heat of the moment. And then later on, they're like, well, I didn't actually mean that, when you explain what the implications of their words were. But that was just the best way they knew to express that sense of frustration and hopelessness and anger that they were feeling. And I wonder if something similar was happening here, where this woman was just so upset, so escalated, that she didn't think through the implications of the words that she chose. Again, I don't know what the text said, so it's really hard for me to determine.
And sent inappropriate text messages.
Her mother says over the next few days, Kaylin's mania and aggression began to worsen, and multiple family members became concerned.
Okay, so now we're adding on mania and aggression. And so I don't know if she means that her daughter was having a manic episode. And again, I don't know how old this lady is, but if she's a teacher, she's been an adult for a while, I would think there'd be some kind of documented history of mania or hypomanic symptoms of some kind if she's at this point in her life. Again, I'd be very hard pressed to think of a situation where those microaggressions alone could have triggered all of these different symptoms. And so the mom is saying that these symptoms seem to progress between the 9th and culminating in the 13th. So over a period of 3 or 4 days, her condition was steadily worsening. I don't know what was going on with the text chain throughout those days, whether things had just kept spiraling out of control, or whether she was isolating and things were spiraling, or if the help she was seeking out was not being helpful. There are a lot of questions about how this case was handled in the intervening days between the initial incident and then the 13th, where apparently she made these threats. And so if she was manic during those times, we would see an increase in impulsive and reckless behaviors. A lot of times, people who are in a manic episode will spend money recklessly, do highly impulsive and potentially dangerous things that they wouldn't do normally. And again, I'm not trying to bash the mom for potentially using these mental health terms incorrectly. I think she's trying to communicate the concern and just the difference that she saw being brought about in her daughter, that some of these terms are maybe the best way she has to be able to explain just how radically different her daughter was acting. And so I think the argument that she's making is that her daughter was not in her right mind. Whether or not psychologically we might say that, whether she was in a manic state or delusional or something like that, seems like the best language that she has to be able to explain what's going on and why her daughter, who she said has never been in any trouble, would suddenly make these threats.
Her help through multiple avenues, including 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, and law enforcement. Families say she finally agreed to get what she thought was care.
But they were not transparent about the fact that they were not taking her for medical attention we called for, and we were led to believe that she would receive. But instead, they were arresting her for text messages sent in her psychotic state.
Footman was charged.
Absolutely, I can see this being a problem when it came to the communication piece. A lot of times, if someone does have a mental health emergency and people are concerned about them transporting themselves safely, or if the parents or a loved one doesn't feel like they can transport them safely, police can transport you to a mental health hospital or facility, like she's saying, but there needs to be some very clear communication about what are the circumstances, whether they're being charged with anything, whether they're being arrested, or whether they're just being transported and they'll be in the care of that mental health facility. And it seems like that was not communicated when they picked up this lady, Kaylin Footman. And so now she's just been in jail instead of getting the help that she needs.
Sending felony terrorist threats via text messages, resisting arrest, and taken to the Sac County Jail. Last week, authorities say she assaulted a deputy. The Sac County Sheriff says jail isn't the best place to handle a mental health crisis, but there are protocols in place.
Those sound pretty serious, and if there are any lawyers in the comments, let me know. But felony terrorist charges, that seems like she must have said something pretty darn serious in those text messages for that to be the charge. And then also resisting arrest, that also is something that doesn't quite add up in my mind. If the mom was saying that they all thought she was being transported to a mental health hospital, why would she have resisted arrest? Because they're saying it wasn't until after she was in jail that they found out that, oh, we're not actually taking you to a hospital or a facility.
To deal with what's in front of us. And what was in front of us were specific threats made about school children and about a school and about specific staff members. So we have to take actions to mitigate any violence that could occur then.
Family is
This is a really hard balance to kind of strike. There is some element of responsibility for, like, if she was making threats against kids, against the school, against faculty and staff, those are all things that people have to take seriously, especially considering how many school shootings we've had in the past years. I can see why law enforcement would err on the side of caution with that, but it's hard for me to reconcile the two seemingly different people that the mom is describing and that the police side of things are describing. One is saying that she's just a victim of the system. She was having a mental breakdown and she said some things that maybe weren't that bad and she should just be released into the care of a mental health facility. And the other one is saying that there are specific threats made, that they considered her a danger and that she was assaulting an officer in jail. And so, like, these two pictures of the same person don't really add up for me.
The sheriff to drop all charges and transfer Footman immediately to a mental health facility and make changes to the system.
We are asking that you guys please create many more 24/7 mental health intervention facilities throughout the city, okay, and county.
The sheriff's office says it's up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is nice of having more hospitals available specifically for mental health, for people who are having a breakdown, to be able to be in a secure place that's not jail, to be in a therapeutic setting and receive that care and observation 24/7 so that they can be safe, they can come down from that break and be okay to reintegrate into society. And what happens is a lot of these places are underfunded and understaffed. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, maybe 5, 6, up to maybe like 10 years ago, there were a lot of these mental health hospitals that were being shut down because they were cutting corners, just because staff were undertrained and there weren't enough staff to keep a proper ratio. People were getting hurt and patients were being abused. And so that's definitely a concern, and why there aren't as many. And part of the reason too is that there's just not as much money in those kinds of areas of mental health to be made for companies running those kinds of facilities. And so all of that kind of combines to it being a really hard sell, that ideally there would be more of these facilities available for people to check into, and it wouldn't be stigmatized, it wouldn't be criminalized. But that also realistically, we've seen those hospitals end up doing a lot of harm to patients who needed help the most. So yeah, very difficult story. I'm sure very controversial. I'm going to be following this story because I think there are a lot of gaps in the knowledge that I have and that the news has about the situation, what specifically she said, what mental health history she has, if any. I really find it hard to reconcile that she would have no mental health history, no concerns of aggression or violence or anything up until this point, where there was a particularly difficult text conversation and she suddenly has this clean break where she's exhibiting manic symptoms, aggression, delusions. Those are all some pretty serious symptoms that I would be surprised that they came out of nowhere. And so for all of the facets that this case entails, race, mental health, law enforcement, safety, and as well as safety in a school particularly, this is a really difficult case. And so I do hope that she gets the help that she needs. And I hope that institutionally, whatever was going on in the school is able to be handled in a respectful and appropriate way so that something like this doesn't have to happen again. But yeah, I'm curious as to all of your thoughts on what is a very loaded situation. Again, we're talking about race, we're talking about mental health, we're talking about criminalizing mental health and safety in schools and all of that stuff. So please comment below. What do you think should have been done in this case? What more information do you think would be helpful to know before you can make an informed decision on what you think about it? Everyone, thank you so much for checking out this video. Please like and subscribe. That helps our channel to grow so that we can continue reacting to videos, continue to provide education on mental health for you all. Thank you all for checking out the channel. See you all next time.